Could this Saturday's game be the last of the Bryan Harsin era at Auburn?
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken farm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Time now for a little Locked On crossover action. I'm Zac Blackerby with Locked On Auburn. Stephen Willis with Locked On Ole Miss. Stephen, this one's interesting. Really fascinating matchup, and the timing here is interesting.
Yeah, it should be really interesting with everything that's going on at Auburn. But Ole Miss has several storylines of their own that they're trying to build, potentially towards Atlanta towards the end of the season. They're starting to see like hazy focuses of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So they're thinking that it's a sold-out stadium. They are genuinely fired up for this game, and we know all the issues that Auburn's having. But the storyline for Ole Miss fans is going to be what could happen, not necessarily what is happening.
Yeah. And so, I mean, is there any concern there, Stephen, when, Ole Miss, looking ahead, you and I talked earlier this week, obviously when we weren't recording, about just the history between Auburn and Ole Miss. Even when Auburn has had lesser teams on paper, they found ways to consistently beat Ole Miss. I mean, is that a factor here?
Well, I think it's always a little bit of a factor. Like if Ole Miss has an 80% win probability in this game, you need to go ahead and drop it down to 70 because you got to just basically bake in that crazy stuff could happen. You go to Auburn last year with a team that won 10 regular season games, your starting quarterback and all your wide receivers gets hurt. Weird things happen in this series. Against Auburn in 2020, there was the play where the returner touched the ball. Ole Miss recovered it and would have gone up 14. They ended up losing the game by 10. It would have been the game-winning play. But Ole Miss ended up losing that because an egregious official mistake. But
a lot of weird fourth down situation calls in that one too by Lane Kiffin.
There's just bizarre things that happen, man. This is just a weird game. It hasn't slanted in Ole Miss's direction very much over the last few years. But, I mean, this year, this is one of those games where if Ole Miss lost the game, it's not going to be viewed as favorable to the Ole Miss staff or anybody around. This is viewed in a way similar to where some years Vanderbilt is looked at by the fan base. Now, this isn't an insult to Auburn. It's just, this is like a bottom third SEC team playing in Vaught-Hemingway stadiums, and it's important that you play that team and not the logo on the helmet that's coming into the stadium.
Yeah, and the headline I mentioned going into this show, Stephen, and there's a reason why a lot of people say there's a chance that this is Bryan Harsin's last game coaching as the Auburn head man, and we'll see if it happens. I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to. I think there is a feeling that it's either going to happen after, of course, if Auburn loses to Ole Miss, or maybe after the Iron Bowl at the end of the season. But there's so many rumors, right? And you're hearing this. It's Paul Feinbaum's bringing it up, tying Lane Kiffin to potentially being one of the 3, 4, 5 names to watch if Auburn does move on from Bryan Harsin. What's the Ole Miss point of view on this?
Come on. Lane Kiffin's not going to Auburn. It's a situation where there's nothing Auburn really can offer, like legitimately offer. You can throw history and stuff that happened 10, 20 years back in there. And yes, if you add that on there, Auburn has some stuff to offer, but Ole Miss is 17-3. They're paying Lane close to $8 million a year. They can go up to $10 million a year. They have state-of-the-art facilities.
More to folks that aren't coaching.
Well, yeah, that's another thing altogether. I mean,
I think that's a plus if you're Lane Kiffin. I mean, the best gig in the world is former Auburn head coach, right? So
there's about 4 of them right now.
Or Gus Malzahn there.
Are they still paying Terry Bowden?
Sometimes it feels like it. No, but I think it's going to be interesting. And Stephen, I don't think it's Lane Kiffin. I don't think Auburn's next coach will be Lane Kiffin. I think it's going to be Hugh Freeze. I think I think Hugh Freeze is on the short list, and we'll definitely see as more comes up after Bryan Harsin's gone. I haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about that on the show, but it's going to be fun to see. And I just think the timing and the way it could line up. It's always fun to be the team that ends an era for a head coach in the SEC, right? I mean, Auburn got to do that a few times with LSU, which I think is always fun to see. So we'll see if it happens with Ole Miss. Like I said, I don't think it's going to. I think they're going to keep him through the end of the season. But to me, that's the biggest storyline. Something that you've talked about, though, building up to Atlanta, Stephen. What do you want to see from Ole Miss as they hypothetically continue to build towards representing the SEC West in Atlanta? Because that's obviously the goal for these guys.
Yeah, listen, every game they've gotten better offensively, from Troy all the way up until Vanderbilt. Just pieces of the offense has improved for each time. Jaxson Dart in the last game, other than 2 passes, played really well. I want to see that next step. I want to see 25 of 32 passes with no interceptions. Now, I don't want to see necessarily 448 passing yards.
Yeah.
But I do want to see him be effective in the passing game, because those weapons on the outside are going to cause teams to have to play the run game even differently. And Ole Miss is already at the point where if they can run the ball on you, it's over. I mean, you have no chance because they can be so effective doing it. But if they get scared about receivers on the outside running past them to where safeties and defensive backs can't rush up to stop the run, this offense is officially a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you look at, and we'll talk more specifically about matchups in a second, Stephen, but you talk about Ole Miss trying to take that next step in the passing game with Jaxson Dart. That's really the thing Auburn does best. I mean, this Auburn team doesn't do a whole lot very well, but the pass defense, I think, is the strength, which is a little surprising because you lose an All-American and Roger McCreary to the NFL draft. But the corner play is started a little rocky. I think corner is definitely a position of strength for this Auburn defense. I think the safeties and defensive backs have been pretty good. I think Ole Miss is going to run it. I think they're going to run it. And then, of course, that'll open up the pass as it will in any offense. But I'd be a little surprised, Stephen, if they threw it first before establishing the run.
I think they will run the ball first. I think it'll look real similar to that Vanderbilt game that Ole Miss played this past weekend. And that was just Vanderbilt. They sold out to stop the run. Auburn knows they have to stop the run. And then in the second half, the pass opened up, and then the big plays just came. But Auburn's a better defensive team than Vanderbilt, so it won't be 3 one-play drives like it was up in Nashville, but it could be a similar type game plan situation on the offensive side of the ball.
Right. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about some of these matchups. Maybe the most hyped up player for Ole Miss over the course of the offseason versus maybe the most underperforming Auburn Tiger. We'll touch on that in just a moment on this Locked On crossover edition. Locked On Auburn, Locked On Ole Miss. But first things first, Stephen, we got to talk about our friends at Bet Online. You've got it down there in the graphic. Ole Miss favored by 14.5 points. This feels right to me. I think this is a good number set by our friends at Bet Online.
Yeah, this is a line that I don't know if I would touch. It looks like it's about right. A couple of points below, a couple of points above it, and there's not really too much complaining that can happen. I think they got this one about right.
Yeah, I think if it was creeping up to 17, that's where I kind of get a little bit more of, okay, maybe Auburn can cover here. But right now I'm kind of leaning towards an Ole Miss. Ole Miss winning in Vegas. But we'll get to our official predictions later in the show. The over-under at 55.5 at Bet Online actually seems a little high to me.
Yeah, other than that Vanderbilt game, Ole Miss has been an under machine this year. And you just can't take the over yet. Now, against Vandy, they showed signs of life offensively, but I don't think they're going to put up 52 points or some crazy thing against Auburn. So it all comes down to, can Auburn score over 20 is kind of the realm that I think we're dealing with. And I don't know if they can.
Well, they haven't. They haven't so far. So We'll see. We'll see. And stay tuned for our official predictions later in this crossover. But hey, if either of these lines are attractive to you, check them out. Bet Online. It's where the game starts. All right, I teed it up. I teed up your prediction, Steven. Give us the matchup that you are watching in this one.
Yeah, the big thing that I'm looking at is Zach Evans against, I think it's Owen Pappoe. Yeah, that is the lineup. If Auburn can stop the run, or at least slow it down, they haven't really stopped the run this year, but if they can slow it down, they have a chance to make this a slog of a game. And that's what Auburn needs offensively. They need this thing to be 20-17, 17-14. And the way that you start to do that is by clogging up the running lanes with Ole Miss. Like I said, if Ole Miss can run the ball, this thing could get ugly, and it could get ugly fairly early. So it's going to come down to that matchup, I think, even not necessarily him and Zach Evans, but maybe him and Quinshon Judkins, basically him in the running back position.
Yeah. I think you could even zoom this out a little bit and say Ole Miss running game versus Auburn linebackers, right? Mm-hmm. Auburn's linebackers have been terrible. Awful. They've been absolutely awful. I don't know how much value you put in Pro Football Focus grades, Steven, but if you do, Owen Pappoe has been awful. He was the worst defender. He scored like a 32 last week, if I recall correctly. Obviously not good. And this is a guy that surprised some folks coming back from last year to this year. Second year in a row, he's been voted as a team captain by his peers. So he's well respected in the locker room. He's an athletic freak. But for whatever reason, he's been consistently out of position. Auburn lost to Kobe McLean. He left and declared for the NFL draft. And we all kind of thought they were a tandem. And now in hindsight, it kind of looks like Zacoby was carrying that room. So they've been rotating guys in, some of it by necessity, some of it because they want to get Wesley Steiner more reps. But Cam Riley's the number 2 guy. Wesley Steiner's the number 3 linebacker. And they've all been okay at best, very inconsistent. And so Zach Evans, obviously his talent speaks for himself, the former TCU transfer. And then the thing that may hurt a little bit extra on Saturday, Quinshon Judkins, this is a guy that begged Auburn to take him. He wanted to come to Auburn so bad, but this coaching staff's like, no, we already got Damari Alston. Let's kind of see who else we've got, and maybe we can get another running back that's better than you. And spoiler that he didn't, and he has been absolutely incredible to watch.
Yeah, the kid runs so angry, and you just look at him, he's like, this guy's 18 years old, because he looks like a junior, like Cadillac Williams out there running around at tailback. And thank you guys. I need to send Bryan Harsin a thank you note for that one.
Yeah, you guys got him. You guys got Ladarius Tennyson.
Mm-hmm.
So
JJ
all kinds
Pegues.
of Auburn ties there. That's right, JJ Pegues. Gosh, that's a crazy story. The matchup I'm watching, and this may be a little obvious just because it's been really the weakness of this Auburn team as a whole when you kind of list out everything. The Auburn offensive line versus the Ole Miss defensive line. I saw you tweeting about it a little bit earlier this week, and you talked about it a little bit on your show, Locked On Ole Miss, earlier in the week. It's a mismatch issue just because they've been historically bad, Steven. And I don't think it's fully a talent thing. There's plays where they're just letting free guys go and pursue Robby Ashford or Tank Bigsby or Jarquez Hunter carrying the ball in the backfield. This is going to be a major problem for Auburn. I don't think Ole Miss's defensive front is great, but neither was Missouri's, and they couldn't do anything. And that was a few injuries ago, may I add.
Yeah, Georgia, it was a weird situation because there was one play that popped up all over Twitter. And basically 4 Auburn offensive linemen slid over and blocked one person and turned 2 players free. And I don't know how that happened. There's one person that's getting blocked by 4 guys, and you look at it and you just wonder how that can happen. It's a schematic problem, honestly, I think. I mean, They're not doing their slide protections right. They're not doing like some of their combo blocking right and their pass protection. Ole Miss has a bunch of stuff that even on a pass play, they might pull 2 offensive linemen or do something crazy. I don't think Auburn can do something like that. I don't think it would even come close to coming off right now.
No, I'm there with you. I'm there with you. So, are you expecting the Auburn offensive line to do anything, or do you think this has a chance to be a 3 or 4 sack day for the Ole Miss pass rush and maybe another limited day running the ball for Auburn? What are your expectations here for this one?
If I was Chris Partridge, one thing I would do is I would send 6 pretty much every play on early downs and just clog up all the holes and just completely take away the run game and force Robby Ashford to beat you. And the way that this offensive line is blocking, there's a good chance if you send 6, 2 of them are going to be free, which will turn into a wild scramble drill. Robby Ashford, yes, will make you pay a couple of times, but you're probably going to get home more times than you're not. And I figure that if you can get Auburn in 3rd and 6 to 10, not even extended yardage, 3rd and 6 to 10, if you do that, they're probably going to convert the first down 15 to 20% less than the average team. So if you do that, you're going to put yourself in a very advantageous position, because there's always the chance that, like Jaxson Dart on offense, while he's growing, he throws Auburn a couple of balls. That could happen. You could give them short fields. So it's going to be important that you kind of take away and constrict Auburn's what they really want to do, and that's hand the ball off to allegedly Tank Bigsby or Jarquez Hunter. Sure. And make hay that way. If you can take that away and force Robby Ashford to be the guy that beats you, I think you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I'm there with you. How has it been for Ole Miss home games this year as far as, like, forcing is a weird word to say forcing, but the visiting team having false start penalties? The reason I ask is that was a major issue. Auburn's first road game of the season was last week in Georgia. Obviously, that's a tough place to play. There was maybe some first road jitters, but it's weird because Auburn is jumping off sides at a crazy amount, had 10 penalties, and it's by the older guys, it's by the veterans, it's by these super seniors that chose to come back for their last year of eligibility. Has that been an issue or something that you've seen over the course of this season?
Vaught-Hemingway is kind of a notoriously quiet stadium, but I say that to say this. Against Kentucky, the play before Will Levis fumbled the ball and Ole Miss recovered and the guy danced with the belly, there was a false start. The crowd forced a false start on a play that they threw a fade, caught, and it was going to be the winning touchdown for Kentucky. That got called back. The penalty got set off. The next play with the sack caused fumble, and Ole Miss was able to seal that game. So it can get that, especially in certain areas of the field, especially inside the 10, 15-yard lines. They're going to be very difficult. If you're at midfield, you're probably not going to have that much problem, because for whatever reason, when the stadium was built, this goes for Davis Wade Stadium in Starkville, but they have those dang bells to help them out. They're built in...
Which is stupid, by the way. Can we all agree that that's stupid?
Oh, it is terrible. At Ole Miss, we confiscate them before the game and melt them down.
I love that.
Yeah. But there's a noise problem with the way those were built. At Auburn, you guys are built similarly the way Williams-Brice was built, those type stadiums. And they are much better at holding in the noise for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. The noise just kind of escapes at Davis Wade and Vaught-Hemingway. But whenever that place gets rowdy and whenever it gets loud, it can be a thing. But you're not going into Tiger Stadium or anything like that if you're asking.
Yeah, sure, sure. All right, let's make our official picks in just a moment on this crossover edition, Locked On Ole Miss, Locked On Auburn. I think it's time. We talked about it with our Bet Online read. We both agree that 14.5 is a good line, so I think there's a pretty good feel of where we're both going with this. But, Steven, you and I talked about this on the radio briefly yesterday. I think it's going to be close for 2.5 quarters. I think it's going to be a one-score game for the majority of the game. And then I think there's a real chance the dam breaks. We saw it last week with Auburn when Stetson Bennett busted a 64-yard run, and Ole Miss has a bunch of different folks. We mentioned the 2 running backs. We mentioned Jaxson Dart. I think there's a bunch of different big play potential guys on this offense. I think something like that happens again, and then I think it's going to be off to the races for Ole Miss.
Yeah, one thing to pay attention to if anybody's watching this, Michael Trigg is out and will be out for probably the next 4 or 5 weeks to the end of the season, out for the year.
Tight end, right?
The tight end. Okay. He hasn't been very effective. He's been a little bit of a goal line weapon, But this is how it could affect Auburn this weekend. There's a chance Ole Miss is going to start running some 20 personnel packages. And by 20 personnel, I mean 2 running backs, no tight ends. So Quinshon Judkins and Zach Evans on the field at the same time. And you're going to see them used in the pass game some. You're going to see them used in different ways. I think this is the logical next step. Casey Kelly is the next man up at tight end. But I think that is something that could happen, and it could make them pretty scary offensively with those guys with their hands on the ball. But with them, one person going out on a pass route, the other person taking the play action on RPO. So it's a pick your poison type situation.
Yeah, and once again, that's putting pressure on what position? The Auburn linebackers, which I think has been a major weakness. And so if I'm Lane Kiffin studying this Auburn defense, why wouldn't you go after the weakest link?
Yeah, and Lane Kiffin, one thing he does is he is going to run something until you stop it. And then he's going to do something else. He's not going to change for the sake of change. He's going to do something that's working over and over and over again. That's the reason receivers like Amari Cooper had like 16 catch games. It's because nobody could cover him.
Sure. Yeah. Stop it. You know what we're doing? Cool. Stop it. No, totally. And why wouldn't you do that? Another thing Lane Kiffin does is he likes to troll, which I think is great.
Yeah.
You informed me and educated me earlier in the week. JJ Pegues, he's in sometimes in like goal line or heavy sets as a lead blocker. Any chance they give him the ball in a short situation to potentially score against his former team?
Possibly, but what I would look for if they get in goal line is a play action pass to Quinshon Judkins where they run him out for a pass route in the corner of the end zone.
Okay, I got you.
That's probably more likely.
Yeah, we saw him do that and be on the receiving end from Bo Nix a little bit earlier in his career. So we'll see. What else are you specifically watching? I know we both think Ole Miss is going to win by multiple scores, but is there anything in your mind that could happen where Auburn could pull off this upset? To me, it's if Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter can get the running game going, and that's more on the offensive line than it is the running backs. But we'll see if they're able to do that. That, to me, is really the only way Auburn can pull off this upset.
Yeah, the thing that everybody needs to look at is Auburn is consistently getting 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. Very manageable things where the run game doesn't have to get taken off the table. Now, Ole Miss runs a 3-2-6. It's a version of the John Haycock defense from Iowa State. That defense's weakness is what I like to call murder ball. And if Auburn fans would be familiar with that because that's what Nick Saban ran with Mark Ingram and Trent Richardson and those guys. Just straight murder ball. They will hand it over and over and over again and just bust you into submission. Well, there's only 3 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers in this defense. The rest are DBs. So whenever Ole Miss lost to Auburn last year playing this defense, it was when Mike Bobo was turning around, handing the ball to Tank Bigsby, getting them in manageable 3rd down positions, and they were able to build a little bit of a lead until they could adjust to it. Now, this team has a little bit more talent than they had last year defensively. They went out to crazy in the transfer portal, and teams have consistently tried to play murder ball against Ole Miss, and they haven't been able to do it yet. Jarquez Hunter, Tank Bigsby, them and the Arkansas running backs are probably the 2 teams left on the schedule that can actually do that. So we will see what this defense can do against Auburn's running game and that murder ball. Because I think Bryan Harsin's going to hand the ball off. You're going to see Tank Bigsby get the ball 20 times. You're going to see Jarquez Hunter get the ball 20 times. And they're going to try and throw the ball with Robby Ashford as little as possible. I think that's the game plan for Auburn. But that is also, if it works, Auburn's best chance to win this game.
Yeah, we'll see if it happens. Steven, for Auburn folks tuning in, whether they're listening or watching, what's the best way for them to kind of peek behind enemy lines this week?
Oh, yeah, we're doing shows all week. Even some perspectives coming in from Chris Gordy. He's going to preview the game Saturday morning. We have this crossover. It's going to be up. I've talked about it all week. It's on the Locked On Ole Miss YouTube channel. Tune in for that. You can follow me at @TheStephenWillis on Twitter. I tweet about all kinds of useless information. And of course, it's available wherever you get your podcasts. So, tune in.
And then, of course, the Ole Miss folks, if you want to peek behind enemy lines, it's sad over here, but always interesting over at Locked On Auburn. For Stephen Willis and Zac Blackerby, this has been a Locked On crossover edition for Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Auburn.